Welcome to another edition of CloseMode, the Enterprise Sales Show. I'm Brian Dietmeyer, CEO of Close Strong, and today I'm really lucky to be here with Matt Brownlee. Matt's got, as I calculated, about 20 years experience in the enterprise sales world. Most recently was SVP of sales for a medical-related firm, and now he's the founder of MPH Coaching, which focuses on growth acceleration. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Very blessed to be here. Appreciate you having me.
So in our chat last week, we were talking about discipline and focus and selling, which it really leaned into it. Like, it really struck me like, holy smokes, we should talk about this. And you brought up kind of the three things, you know, and there's a lot of ways to think about that. I had a mentor who used to kind of end every meeting with, all right, what are the three things we got to do right now, right? Instead of the long list of stuff. And so I like that idea of focusing on, you know, the top three. But I want to cross over a little bit into kind of your competition at a pretty high level with marathons and triathlons. I have a sense there's probably a little bit of that focus and discipline that carries over into sales. Would you correlate those two?
Yeah, on my better days, there absolutely is a little bit of both of those things. I've been a competitive triathlete and endurance athlete for, a couple decades now. I'm proud to be an Ironman finisher. I've been fortunate enough to toe the starting line for the Boston Marathon and have had, put in a lot of miles and early mornings along the way. And I believe that sport and athletics in general is a wonderful metaphor for so many things in business and in life, absolutely. But especially with regards to discipline and focus. And as I thought about that a little bit following our conversation, there's just so many things that matter quite a bit with both, really. You know, preparation matters so much. You know, usually at the beginning, at the starting line of a running race, or if I'm floating in a lake somewhere about to begin a triathlon, you can look around, and what's really, really neat is that it really doesn't matter where your competition has come from, you know, the color of their skin, their gender, how much money they make, what their parents did for a living, that sort of thing. It all comes down to, did this guy and this guy get up more often at 5 o'clock in the morning to put in the hard work on the bike, on the trails, in the pool. And if he or she did, they're going to beat me. But if I did, then I'd stand a pretty good chance to beat them on that particular day. And I think the same is true for sales as well, that preparation is so critical. I think another place where I see a crossover, Brian, is that coaching matters a ton.
Yeah.
Coaches provide a structure, they provide feedback, and sometimes they can do the thinking for you, and they can be tough but fair. And great coaches, just like great leaders, can definitely set up athletes, business people, et cetera, for a ton of success. And to that end, you know, teammates matter quite a bit in both as well. I just did a workout just this morning with a couple teammates that I train and compete with here locally. And the time just flies. It's a heck of a lot more enjoyable. I literally ran faster in the 6-mile run this morning than I absolutely would have if I would have just set out on my own. And man, it's the same is true as well. There's an old proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I've been blessed to be part of, you know, a lot of wonderful teams over the years as well. So I think that really transcends to business, that if you surround yourself with good, hardworking people, the results are better. It's a lot more fun along the way. The celebrations are a lot more epic. And then, we'd be remiss to say, whether it be in a sales environment or an athletic environment, you know, results matter too. Results matter quite a bit. And, you know, I could come back from a race with 10,000 people, and the first thing my kids are going to ask is, so did you win? Yeah. You know, my son comes back from his game, just, you know, hey, how'd you do? But, you know, and who won? And the same is true for sales. Recency matters, results matter, and you have to have a thick skin and have enough of a recency bias to do your thing, celebrate or learn from your losses, and move on to the next one pretty unapologetically. You know, anytime I come back from a race and my family or my friends or parents ask, hey, so how did it go? my answer over the years has become, I did exactly as well as I deserved to do
Right.
today. If I
Good point.
if I had put in the work, that tended to show up that day, on the field or on the court or whatever the case was. And if I didn't, well, my results are probably going to indicate that as well. And damn if I don't feel like that's incredibly true in a business setting. I mean, you can tell me if you find that as well, but it's, hey, whether it be, hey, how did that podcast conversation go, or how did that sales meeting go? It's like, well, I just kind of winged it, sort of rolled out of bed. Like, well, I
Right.
bet the results are going to reflect that as well. But it's, hey, if I put in the work. I was ready to go. I was prepared for every objection. I had, the slides ready. I had every, value, talk track ready to go. I bet it's going to work out for us more often than not. So just so much crossover as it relates to a focus and discipline approach, really,
So
for
I
both.
wonder for you, let's go to sales coaching. When I think about discipline and focus, one thing that comes to mind is, get up early, make all the calls, do the pre-work, all that sort of stuff. So I think that's part of it. And then another part you spoke about last week was kind of the strategic focus and the thinking focus, And so let's start with the bad news. When what are the indicators of a lack of focus? What shows up where you say, "Oh man, we got to dial into the three things for this group."
Yeah, I think it's just a unintentionality or lack of focus with what a person is looking to get out of that interaction, and that shows up with just not having a plan and hoping that. I remember very early in my sales career, I went on a lot of meetings. I was able to get in front of customers, and I really just defaulted to, gosh, I hope that if I dress sharply and I smile big and I talk about, a race that I just did, or some place that my, girlfriend, fiance, wife, now wife, Emily, hey, if I talk about places I've traveled, I'm just really likable, then, why the heck wouldn't I get that sale? And I learned really, really quickly that got me a lot of meetings and a lot of lunches, and also finished second
Yeah,
place
yeah,
quite a bit. And it was, you really have to make a pivot from being, just that likable seller or even leader to, like, there's a big difference between, hey, yeah, I enjoy that person. They're pleasant to work with. They treat me respectfully, and that matters a ton. Versus, that person's an incredibly effective at their job, either at bringing other people along with them, creating a strong legacy, or ultimately those results that we talked about, ultimately closing the deal. So I think that a lack of focus looks like not having a good plan, whether it be for a meeting in particular or a negotiation, what you want to get out of it, or just a general strategy for which customers you're trying to get in front of, and why, and how to cater your messaging differently based on the answers to all the above.
it reminds me of a podcast we were on the other day, and a quote that I read many years ago. It's the dull and determined effort that yields the brilliant results, right? So we all want to focus on, hey, that meeting went well, that presentation went well, and it's all that grunt work up front that gets us there. Do you think?
Well, you nailed it.
Yeah,
There's an expression I like, that we're rewarded in the light for the work that we do in the dark. And going back a bit, even to the training piece, I mean, the workouts that I do are pre-dawn. They're
yeah,
before packing the lunches and getting the kids off to school, and carpools, and then going to work. But man, everybody sure does cheer loudly that day when you're racing and you're coming across the finish line. And how many rooms have you and I been? We've both worked for billion-dollar companies where you're filling up a ballroom at a big corporate meeting, and somebody gets brought up, and it's they hit the president's club, or they're a top performer, whatever the case may be, and you get the big round of applause. Everybody's
yeah,
whispering, how much money did she make this year? Holy cow, that guy
yeah,
killed it. And you get rewarded in the light, but what you didn't see was that woman building a call sheet on a Sunday night, or that guy, skipping, not having a drink so he would be sharper
yeah,
the next day, or,
yeah.
whatever that looks like. Yeah, I definitely think and that does get in the way, because that prep work, it ain't sexy. It's not fun. In fact, I think it's an entirely different skill set than what we think of when we think of selling. Selling is extroverted and it's shaking hands and kissing babies and it's being charming. I mean, discovery questions are fun, negotiations and even cold calling can be fun at times. Um, the prep work and the account intelligence, that's not fun. I think it often feels sedentary. It doesn't feel like you're doing a whole heck of a lot, but the the special operators, the Navy SEALs tell us that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And sometimes, if not all the time, pausing a beat to slow down and get yourself actually prepared for what's to come pays a ton of dividends. But in the moment, it sure can feel a little bit
Yeah.
boring uh, at the time. It doesn't feel a lot like
Yeah,
work. So therein lies
it's
the
interesting.
challenge.
We've coached on a lot of deals and a lot of renewals, and we eliminated this idea of sort of renewal planning or negotiation planning to say no. You are actually, the moment you start thinking about stuff and you start blueprinting out your plan and doing the research, you are in the middle of it. And I know it's just a little contextual change, but I think that is part of the problem. It's like, planning, you're right, we're extroverts. We want to go do the work. No, this is the work. The moment you start doing that, it's the work and maybe the most important part of the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as the great athlete turned actor, I believe Mike Tyson so eloquently said, also, everyone has a plan until they get punched
Yeah.
in the face. So that being said, I don't think you throw planning or that intentionality out the window. I think it just means it's better. It's still better to start with a plan and just be prepared to be audible ready, as opposed to just wing it. But no, that's definitely part of the approach to success in
You
anything.
spoke the other day. I mean, a lot of this is about that, this individual doing this work to prepare for this race or prepare for this deal. You also talked, in fact, your quote was thinking through kind of discipline and focus from a more strategic sense is this is exactly what we do, for whom we do it, and why we do a nice job with it. Can you clarify that? Because I feel like there's something there in terms of the strategic focus and the way we go talk to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just as business people, the last thing that we would want to do is to, God forbid, we limit our scope of opportunity or we somehow turn off a potential revenue stream. I mean, fate worse than death. We've got
Yes.
goals to hit here, but I think that being highly intentional and very specific, I had a mentor when I first founded MPH Coaching say simply, hey, you need to be very easy to buy from and also refer out to, so that when folks think of you or meet people just in life, it's as specific as possible. Like, okay, like, oh, I've got to have them call Brian
Right.
for that.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he does. But holy cow, is that tough to turn down that notch of like, well, God forbid I turn anybody away. But we're not Walmart. We're not Target. We're not here to serve everyone. So the example that comes to mind is there was a young man that I was serving as his sales leader a few years ago, and he had the blessing and the curse of hustled very hard and took a scorched earth approach. And seemingly behind every door was a potential customer. And on one hand, that's a blessing, but the curse of that is there's a lot of low hanging fruit and a lot of things that would very much distract him from ultimately achieving real success and real results. So what we did together was create a much more narrow focus, an elevator pitch, if you will, but a narrow focus within a very specific geography, within a very specific industry. And at first, that felt like taking a lot of potential food off the
Yes.
plate, which doesn't feel good for any of us. But how the story ends is that he suddenly had a very niche expertise, a wonderful story to tell in the marketplace, and increasingly a lot of success stories and proof points that actually mattered to his customers because they were in very similar situations or even at competing brands where they cared what was going on within that. And as you can imagine, the story ends on a happy note that that person had more success for themselves, for their surrounding team, for the office that they were a part of than they ever did before when, again, we were terrified to somehow limit the scope of opportunity. So I think really giving thought to this is what we do, this is our ideal
Yes.
customer, And this is why we feel like we do a pretty nice job with it. Feels a heck of a lot more genuine than, hey, we can do everything under the sun. And in my experience, Brian, the folks who want to work with you because they believe in you, they believe in perhaps your core values, your ethos, or there's just a personal connection, they'll actually drag you or refer you into maybe adjacent swim lanes or perhaps a little bit beyond that hedgehog, that core principle piece, as Jim Collins says. And then at that point, you've got the wonderful decision to make of saying, like, hey, could we actually expand our services and could I do right by them and take on that business? Or I think you could gain a ton of credibility and say, hey, thanks, that's not our
Yes.
core
Yep.
competency. But let me refer you to somebody who can. And you elevate yourself even further because it's clearly not just a money grab. So all sorts of positive impacts, I believe, for the customer and internally for sticking to what you know and doing the best you
That's
can.
such a discipline issue. It's like I'm hearing that all the way through. I recall when I first started my first consulting company about 20 years ago, I was having dinner with a buddy of mine. He asked me what I did, and I told him, and he said, "So it's basically Dietmeyer Consulting and storm door repair." You know, this was, I'm not kidding, Matt. This is 20 years ago, and it hit me. You know, I was like, "You're right," but you and I talked a little bit about early stage. You have to have some of that. Like I need to find the revenue streams, but as you mature a little bit more, we really need that focus. And you just commented on sort of either ideal customer or ideal opportunity criteria. We, separate of this podcast, we interviewed 60 execs talking a lot about pipeline, and I would say 70% of them said, here's the problem with my pipe. I'm asked to come in and help get these deals closed. A bunch of them aren't even properly qualified. We shouldn't have gone after these pieces of trash in the first place. And this is a real issue here. It's living, it's breathing, it has a heartbeat. I'm going to go after it.
Well, I can only imagine the airline miles and hotel stays and the opportunity cost for the leaders that are chasing that down. What you made me think of, Brian, is and how much time is being wasted on the customer side as well, or externally, because then they're being taken through a sales process that maybe they shouldn't be participating in, or one of the things that us, sellers sometimes stink at is thinking of the ripple effects of the folks on our team. I wonder, depending on the widget that organization is selling, how many folks in the technology or the ops team or implementation or the design folks are now putting together slide decks or whatever the case may be for an opportunity that isn't fully vetted or qualified or probably shouldn't go through anyway. And now a lot of people are burning a lot of calories
Yeah.
potentially for something that could have been headed off at the pass if there was a bit more discipline. But hey, I say all that. I'm pretty low on, while I consider myself a faith-based person and I'm happy to lead with that, I'm pretty low on dogma. So I say all this to you and your audience to say that I get it. And it's incredibly easy because, again, we've got goals to hit. I was just talking to a client yesterday, and we're recording this. It's mid late April, who already knew, because Matt, he goes, I only got 9 weeks in the quarter left. Like I got to get going. So I say that with a ton of empathy. It's a lot easier said than done. We all need to take care of ourselves and our families and cash checks. That's kind of that's the friction for both the sellers and the leaders of those folks. That it's certainly easier said than done. So I give a lot of grace and empathy. We've all done it. Probably
Yes.
do it again, but it certainly takes up a lot of time that might be spent other places. That's
I
for
wonder,
sure.
you said something the other day about how this kind of focus can end up in agreements. And I was interested and intrigued by that. How do you make the connection between sort of strategic focus up front and agreements you're executing?
Well, first, you're very flattering. I must have said a lot of things the other day that resonated. I hope this conversation is half as useful. Maybe we should have recorded the last one. Um, yeah, I think so. We have that ideal state. You've got that level of intentionality on the front end when you think about your prospecting and your ideal client profile that you want to be sitting across from. And then I think it's what I found my clients have been really appreciative of, and what's worked out really well, is to have that same level of intentionality when you negotiate or structure what that SOW, what that agreement looks like with the customer. And let me be as specific as I can with that. I think that it's massively mutually beneficial to have just that, have performance based or Shohei Ohtani-esque, for the baseball fans out there, backloaded contracts or agreements in whatever way might make sense for any of our businesses that reward a great product or service being provided that actually allows for your customer to have the outcomes that they're looking for. Going back to, in sports, we see this all the time with, hey, such and such quarterback is going to, instead of, signing an extension the year before his contract expires, he or she, they're going to play in a contract year, and they're going to, they could blow out a knee and never play again, or they could have a career year and get paid ungodly amounts of money, more than they ever would have otherwise received. And several times out of 10, I think it's more the latter than the former. They really step up. What that has looked like for me most recently. So my background comes from the staffing and recruitment industry, and now serving as a sales and leadership coach and doing some consulting. Is that, what might that look like if the contract was such that, hey, that individual that we helped your company hire, if they don't do a great job, then that transaction is pretty minimal. But if this ends up being someone that just blows the doors off and exceeds every expectation, and therefore your organization makes more money or moves the needle in however we're measuring that, then there's, then the invoice is reflected accordingly. Or if, I'm serving a team by helping to serve as a fractional head of TA or sales, or coaching some of their reps, and those folks go out and have a banner year, you could set it up to where perhaps there's a base tier of pricing that's completely agnostic of results. That's just, hey, this is the service, this is how much it costs, and everybody feels good about the transaction. Or if we want to bet on ourselves, we say, hey, that base level is going to be significantly less, but there's an attractive carrot at the end, to where if we get the results that we're all aiming for here, yeah, the customer might pay a little bit more. But what my clients have shared is that they're happy to do so, because then they are realizing far more revenue and gross profit, EBITDA, new logos added, whatever the case may be. And they're happy to do that because it's still a smaller percentage than what they would have normally earned if that person had been on or even behind their normal ramp as an early stage employee. So I think, to answer it, keeping that intentionality all the way through, and setting up deals whenever and however it might make sense, so that both folks are invested in the ultimate success of that transaction or that relationship, I think is just serves as a win-win.
So if we'll see if I can recap our chat here, going back to the idea of, three things. What are the three most important things? So I'm hearing focus and discipline on strategy, where we're going, right, and who we're going to do it with. Focus and discipline on tactics, how are we getting there? And then I love the notion that the third thing is, then we're contracting against that, right? That's the life cycle. Here's where we're going, and here's how we're going to get there, and here's the agreements we have, is that, and finding real focus and discipline across all three. Is that fair?
I think you summed it up beautifully and much more succinctly than I probably would have.
This is my job.
Well done.
This is my job. You've been
there you go.
super generous with your time and your ideas, and I love, one of the things I love about this podcast is we have this community of enterprise sellers and us sharing with one another, which is pretty cool, and I really appreciate you doing that. And to that end, we would love, for those of you who listen, if you have a comment, a criticism, or something to add to the conversation, please go ahead and at Matt or at me on LinkedIn or wherever you see this, and let's have a dialogue with this after it comes out. So sorry, Matt, I put you on the hook for that one.
Hey, you're good. No, I love that you're building a community. I think, going back to early stage, certainly we all have our competitors in the market and folks we love to take market share from, but I'm also, if everybody gets better, kind of rising tide lifts all ships, and there certainly tends to be a lot of pie out there for everyone, and just trying to do a good job. And it's a small world. So happy to mix it up and hear about what landed, both positive or what folks might disagree with. I'll never stop learning on that front as well. So excited to see what
I
might come
agree.
back.
A really good book came out many years ago called Co-opetition, and it's a really good concept. So again, I thank you so much for your time, and look forward to hearing everyone's feedback.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brian.